Hi everyone, and welcome to the Game Dev Club's first ever panel event, in which we're going to be discussing the question, how will games change our society in the future? I'm Cameron, president of the club, and I'm hosting the panel. And here with me today, I've got, I've got Dr. Nicole Vickery. Nicole's a lecturer of computer science at Queensland University of Technology. Nicole's research centers on player experience of video game activities in terms of flow. Her developing research includes flow and video games and how games facilitate interaction and moving forward with VR and AR. Nicole's research can be found on Google Scholar if you look it up. You might recognize Nicole from such subjects as IGB 180, IFB 103, IGB 300, and 301. IGB 321, IGB 100, and IGB 200. Also on the panel here with me today, I have Brandon Rawlings. Brandon graduated from QUT last year, majoring in game design and with a passion for level design. For the capstone project, his group was assigned an industry contract with Queensland Fire and Emergency Services to create a game focused on creating community engagement for their open days. Since graduating, Brandon's been working on a solo indie project, currently still under development and is aiming to get it to a publishable state soon. We've also got Lexi Townsend, a VR artist and illustrator, honors student, research assistant, and the director at Misfit VR. Misfit VR is an Australian indie development studio that specializes in cognitive VR and imagination. Lexi mainly works in stylized VR illustrations and 3D environments, as well as VR games within the mental health and academic space. They're currently researching graphical realism and style within virtual reality systems and its influence on presence, as well as assisting PhD work involving VR and burns rehabilitation. We've also got Jack McClenaghan. After graduating with a BA in development/design from SAE, is our non-QUT member on the panel. Jack's now working as a QA analyst and international communicator in the gambling games industry. Jack's had experience in a wide variety of areas, from military training technology to the creation of games applications for the Queensland Police Service to more traditional UX design consulting for some of Brisbane's mobile and AR studios. Like most devs, Jack is of course also creating small games and the classic two-day trash projects in his own time. Also on the panel today, we've got Tom Lamb. Tom's an undergraduate student studying the Bachelor of Games and Interactive Environments and majoring in game design. Tom's here as a skilled student and to represent you, our audience, on the panel. Now that spiel is over, say hi everyone.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hello.
Okay, so to launch us off, I guess a good question to start with is, where do you see the future of gaming, Nicole? Where do you see it going, like PC, VR, console?
There's a lot of push, especially from a research perspective, into the VR and AR space. And ultimately, what can immersive technologies do for us beyond just entertainment, but in training and in education? Some of the elements that you've mentioned in relation to Lexi's work, especially in birds rehabilitation, mental health, are really important areas that we're headed towards. Ultimately, PCs will always have an advantage in entertainment-based gaming because they're easily updatable. When compared to our consoles, obviously, over time, they get a little bit older. But yeah, so the future looks immersive from a research perspective.
We're all happy that it's going to go in that direction because it's good fun. Brandon, have you got any input on that from your perspective? I know you've done some stuff in VR before for your capstone.
Yeah. I have a little bit to say on it. When we were starting out originally, like with the first contract that we got from Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, they actually wanted us to try and make a level building training simulator that they can use. which was well and truly out of the scope of what we were able to make for the capstone project. But when we were like discussing it, we were able to come up with like a lot of ideas before the teaching staff told us to make an actual game instead of a level editor. But we came up with like a bunch of ideas that could actually be used quite useful in like actual training situations for like firefighters. And we also were able to come up with like different ideas that could be used in like police training and even like just other emergency situations like floods and like bushfires and other bad situations that might involve like the Queensland Police, such as, I don't know, hostage situations. Obviously, well and truly out of the scope for what we were able to do, and especially with the headset that we were given being the Bifocus. But yeah, I agree with Nicole. I feel that the future is definitely moving in a direction of like VR in multiple different areas outside of just games, you know, simulations and all that. But yeah, that's my
especially as VR gets more accessible.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Taking a small point off of what Nicole and Brandon are saying there, I could definitely see that a lot of the situations we're talking about here is just using the technology available to put somebody in an environment that they're not in. That's something that might not constantly be accessible to their everyday life. And this goes into training, or, you know, for the stuff Lexi's working on, it also goes into producing a different mental or emotional state to the one that they might be in the real world. And I think that's really brought, you know, it's going to be our sort of big venture. And we'll talk, I'm assuming, more about serious games and that kind of stuff later, but it all ties into just being able to create a 3D space, a virtual environment where things are not as they are in your lounge room or your office around it.
Yeah, that's definitely, I've had a go at VR. It's quite fun. I guess let's push forward. Let's push forward into the next bit of thing. So with games going into this very immersive environment, I guess, what are your thoughts on games for different purposes other than just, you know, recreational ones? I'm going to push this one especially to Brandon.
So games like outside of just like, you know, recreational, especially like recently, games have even started to use it as like a different, you know, platform to host like events, like what am I trying to say? Centered around like, you know, live performances or concerts for like popular actual like musical artists. I just have a few examples from like when Fortnite did events with Marshmello and Travis Scott, how they had like actual full-on in-game concerts purely focused around like just those artists performing their music. I can't exactly remember if it was like actually live or if it was all pre-recorded. Fairly certain it was pre-recorded just to make sure there was no issues. But still, it's quite interesting to see like how it's advanced just from like games purely just being about like letting off some steam, you know, playing a first-person shooter and shooting some people, or playing a adventure game and going off to see what trees are like in the north. But yeah, and it's also like just continuing on from that Fortnite example, how it's also going into like, I guess you could call it an advertisement for a film, because there was that another event for Fortnite where they were doing the Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker stuff. Where, you know, they just did like a little Star Wars set piece with all like the ships fighting each other and all that. And I think they also did a story element, which is questionable to put into a completely different piece of media, but that's honestly an entirely different discussion, which I won't go into.
Yeah, that's, I guess, interesting to think about, especially that bit about Fortnite. Is there any other uses for games, particularly as a communication medium, Jack, that you've talked about this before?
On a similar vein to Brandon's Queensland Fire Services, I spent half a year running an application for the QPS, trying to make something to get ideas about safety and personal safety and environmental safety in Australia across to people who come from a different culture or a different environmental landscape or so on and so forth. And the reason that you can use games for that quite effectively, or even just the idea of interactive media, is because as long as somebody has picked up a phone and played around with applications or something before, they will have a general understanding of the visual medium. What means good, what means bad, what is go, what is stop, all these kind of sort of ingrained behaviors. By the time you download a new application, you pick up your phone, you know how to navigate it and all that kind of stuff. These sort of ingrained pathways. You can use that, you can take advantage of it to communicate with people that don't speak the same language as you, or maybe don't have the same, you know, country background and that kind of stuff, which is really amazing in and of itself, because we've produced this method of communicating, and you can take advantage of that to, you know, sort of tell people what is, you know, what is, in my case, for example, tell people or provide lessons on safety, on what is, you know, things that you can do and things that you can't do in certain scenarios and so on, and using no English and using nothing that's meant to be essentially Australian, or, you know, in Australian culture as it stands, to provide stuff like lessons about what a blue bottle is, or, you know, the different life-saving flags and what they mean, using purely that medium.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the video of the tourist picking up the blue ring octopus. That was on Facebook a while ago. If you haven't, then benefit to you.
And it's stuff like that where you can use this language, say language, this set of rote learnings that we sort of understand the more we use the same technology that allows us to communicate.
No, yeah, that's very good. On another note, I think Ross has just joined and is going to sort out some of our IT issues.
They already should be joining now.
Awesome.
I see 2 already joined. 3. Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, now that that's working, it's still quite an interesting thing to talk about, that using games as communication. I'll cut to an aside briefly and say, you know, welcome to the panel event, everyone who was only just allowed to join due to IT concerns. So I could do the whole intro spiel again, but you will see this in the recording. I'll give you the brief. So we've got Dr. Nicole Vickery, who's a lecturer of computer science at QUT. Her research centers on player experience of video game activities in terms of flow. And she talks about things such as flow, video games, facilitating interaction, and particularly moving forward with VR and AR. And her papers are on Google Scholar. Brandon graduated QUT last year, having done his capstone project on an industry contract with Queensland Fire and Emergency Services to create a VR game for community engagement. Since then, he's been doing his own projects. We've got, this is quicker than last time, we've got Lexi Townsend. Lexi's a VR artist and illustrator, honors student, research assistant, and director at Misfit VR. Misfit VR being an indie development studio specializing in cognitive VR and imagination. Jack graduated from SAE, you know, a bit of a non-QUT representation on the panel. He's now working as a QA analyst and international communicator in the gambling games industry, and has a wide variety of other experiences and skills, such as military training technology, creation of games applications for the Queensland Police, and UX design consulting for mobile and AR studios. And we have Tom, the face of all of our undergrads and new students on this panel. And now back to the actual conversation. We just talked about, you know, games as platforms for other events and ways to share ideas without a common language. And please do check us out on YouTube afterwards for more detail. So, and I guess, and I'll put this to Nicole, in order to communicate with people through games and use games for other purposes, you've really got to draw from other disciplines, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. So often we see games bringing in elements of psychology, basic psychology and conditioning in the way that we use rewards. We can encourage players to perform a particular action because ultimately we've associated that with something that's good. Hey, you know, you've gone and you've achieved this many levels, I'm going to give you something good. And it's the same way that we'd condition as we grow up. Obviously, there's quite a bit of link between games and how we actually design for basic computing, so human-computer interaction. And in that context, in human-computer interaction, we often talk about usability in terms of usefulness and how well a piece of technology supports how we actually can perform a particular action. But games are a little bit odd in that they throw obstacles in our way, and it's kind of an inverted triangle in that it's trying to get in our way towards a particular goal, but still so many elements that we are looking for when we're designing games, in the sense that a game should be easy to learn but really difficult to master, ultimately that quote. And so just with like using Microsoft Word, it should be really easy to learn and in this case really easy to master. So a lot of the elements come across there as well. And in level design, for students who move through the games degree and study level design, you'll see a strong association with architecture and designing spaces to be ultimately digitally lived in. And I'm sure our animation students can attest to the importance of film and screen-based media to games.
I've certainly seen that in some games that I've had a go at. You know, some of them are almost movies. So I guess talking about that, and how, you know, sharing game applications and what other things you have to bring in, would you say, and I'll address this to the panel at large, would you say that there's areas that games haven't touched yet where they really could, with all of that in mind? Let's start with Jack.
That's a hard thing to just sit and go, oh yes, I know it's got blank, because you don't know until it hits there. It's one of those ultimate trends where I think a lot of people, especially designers and studios and so on, want to be on the bleeding edge of that curve and get the new thing before everybody else does. But it's something you can try to guess beforehand and go, oh, in the next 10 years we'll be in the middle of games all about blank that we've never seen before. But again, guessing the future is always difficult in this sort of market. But rest assured that every conceivable thing that you can think about a game going for, somebody will try. The question is, will it succeed? I've seen a lot of horrendous attempts at really outlandish game concepts in a more traditional style. I apologize for bringing it up, but something like Agony, where somebody gets something completely on an extreme end and just throws it out there and it doesn't do very well. So what's really going to depend on is what sticks, what hits, what creates those successes, and what just falls by the wayside of stuff that people go, oh, someone tried that, didn't work. That's really going to be the kicker. And judging that, that's hard to do. If it was easy to do, we'd have hits all the time. Every game would be a perfect success and also perfectly unique and new. But you can't do it, which is why new ideas are a risk or a fail. That's why you get repeated things, is because it's very hard to tell what hasn't been done before, but what will be successful.
Well, I guess any trends that you've noticed, particularly Nicole, through your research, that seem to indicate where else games could go, or is this sort of a far too conceptual a question for right now?
It's very conceptual. Ultimately, the direction of gaming has really largely been dependent on the evolution of technology, right? Earlier we had this heavy focus. Ultimately, when games first came out, those more console-based, you know, we were in the arcade and they were pinball machines, and then Space Invaders, etc. And then the move towards home consoles, and then ultimately to personal PCs. So I think it really heavily relates to the technology. And there'll be some elements that I think that we'll see coming through as technology becomes better. Like 5-10 years ago, VR was a bit of a, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. The technology isn't good enough for it yet. And yet here we are in 2020, and the technology for VR is significantly more accessible, right? It's slightly cheaper for a household to actually own, and it's a little bit cheaper for our more indie community to actually purchase the startup for it. I think to understand where we would be heading in terms of video game technology, it's to look at base technology.
That's actually a really good perspective and answer to that. That's why we've got you here. So I guess that brings us to another thing. So we've been talking about where games are going and, you know, what games are used for. Let's launch off that and talk. Let's talk about some more ethics stuff. And I realize I haven't really been calling on you that much, Lexi, so if you would like to chip in. So let's think, so there's games and there's a lot of things a game has to do to be successful, including financially successful. And I'm sure we can name some examples of those as a panel. I'll start, well, let's name some of the things that that games companies have done, and then we'll lead into some more deep questions. And because I haven't called on them, I'll start with Brandon.
Yeah, so what games are doing to like make money? That's the question, right? Or like
Yeah.
what they're currently doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the very, very obvious answer at the moment is like loot boxes and battle pass systems and all that. Like pretty much like every game is having some sort of like battle pass system to really just sort of incentivize spending more money on the game because of like all the juicy rewards that you can get from the battle pass. Can't think of like any other like special ones outside of like cosmetic only like purchases or whatever.
Yeah.
So if anybody else had any perspectives or ideas. But
Yeah, is there anything you can think of, Lexi, as director of Misfit VR?
I think I'm going to talk more from a hiring and like employee basis, because I feel like burnout is a serious problem that a lot of games companies are having at the moment, and we need to talk about it because especially in Australia, since we're so densely full of indie companies, like we need to really work on reducing the amount of burnout that employers will feel. Yes, it can definitely provide so many financial benefits to have them working into the ground, and there's some great titles that have come out, but I think it's a serious problem that everyone needs to be very, very careful of and very aware of, especially when it comes to if you're a director or you're hiring, contracting people. You need to make sure that they're working hours that are ethical, and you're working hours that are ethical, and you're not leading with a bad example, definitely.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's more than just consumer-facing strategies that a company can do in order to be quote-unquote successful. And I guess let's take this and we'll bring it into some more ethical grounds. Jack, you make gambling games.
Oh, yes.
What's
Stealing
your
money from old
perspective?
ladies. That's my day job.
What's your perspective about what lines maybe a company could, should, and whether they, you know, are unreasonably expected to by the consumer?
I can see two sort of main directions to take this. Number one being the idea, they're tied together, but number one being the idea of transparency and clarity. So for example, the common conception of a poker machine, you know, go and slap some pineapples in the old, you know, Bricky's laptop sort of deal. You know it's very on the nose as to what happens. There's a cultural perception around what this is. This is a way to lose money. Or, you know, there's no real way to win, essentially, over the course of this machine's lifetime. And that clarity means that people don't feel cheated. They don't feel as though they have, for example, paid for something that they you know, didn't expect Obviously, you get into addiction and people are going, no, I can win, I must win. And that's a psychological effect, which is where you start to become unethical, if you attempt to convince people otherwise, which brings into the sort of the ethics part where, I mean, I could be misjudging this. So anybody else on the panel with more experience in this, feel free to go, no, this is not how it is. But the idea of games as a piece of software that you just buy and own, fading out. So for example, I buy my Ratchet Gladiator, I take it home, I play it on my PS2 and I own that thing. It's more leaning into, and this leads back into what a company needs to be successful, signing or a contract or some sort of deal or buying your way into leasing a service instead of consuming a written and wrote product. So the company's responsibility in that, if they want to continue to make money, is to continue that service in a way that's expected. So for example, don't drop your servers a couple of months after launch. Don't release it something that's different to what your consumers expect. And if you do release something that's different to what your consumers expect, you need to rectify it because they will feel as though their end of the contract has not been fulfilled, they've been cheated. If you change your piece of software or your game to become more of a grind or to add pay to win post-launch, people don't get what they expected. And that will mean they don't trust you to fulfill your end of that contract because it's now an ongoing sort of deal where you continue to provide services and updates and changes. Your players trust that the changes are good and they will be more likely to continue to spend money in your microtransactions or your DLC or so on. So I think the boundary between ethics is transparency and consistency. If you can do that, you will continue to make money as long as you sell a good product. But if you start, we've seen a lot of companies that generally produce products that a lot of people enjoy. And I'll go down the Bethesda route for a second. But once you have that reputation of having lost, what I'm looking for, trust.
Credibility?
Word for trust. Yeah, you've lost reliability and trust in what you will provide, then people will be less likely to get something from you again because they're not buying a piece of software. They're leasing into the experience of something, and that experience can change. And if you change it in a way they don't expect, in a way that's to their detriment, they won't lease another piece of software off you. So that's the line that you have to sort of draw, the way to think about it, I guess.
So that's actually a really good one. Does anyone else want to follow on through that? It's just next person to unmute their mic. Or I can call out names.
You're gonna have to.
I'm gonna have to call out names.
I can follow through with this if you'd like.
Yeah, I was gonna call on you next, actually.
Sure. So from a usability perspective, so keeping in mind that technology, almost anything has really multitudes of factors that go into it. From a usability perspective, and this is one that we apply to not just games, but to all IT, credibility and reliability are key things. Right? So the instance that you break that trust with the consumer, all of a sudden, they're less likely, as Jack was saying, to go back to you. And ultimately, you can see this, you can build up trust over time by creating constantly excellent products, right? And we see this kind of social element in relation to owning a good product. So a lot of people who really enjoy Macintosh or Mac products will own the iPad, the iPhone, the iWatch, because they have a history of ultimately good products, or at least it's this image of owning the brand, right? And so if you can go on to ultimately damage an entire brand by running off and kind of losing credibility by creating something that's unethical. But I think to a certain extent, and I completely agree with Jack, it's all about being transparent and communicating with your audience.
Yeah. Do you mind if I tie that? Sorry. Do you mind if I tie that into what Lexi said earlier about stuff like burnout? Because that you were talking about the social aspect of it with owning a brand. I think it's really interesting to also see the way that a player base now interacts with a development studio or a design team, or the marketing side of it at least. Whereas in 2002 or something, it's a label on the back of the box and you go, oh, okay, cool. Whereas now we have constant developer updates and videos for community and community management and all that aspect, which I think really ties in that social awareness of a company. So for example, if you go, oh, this game was made and it's good, but people worked 100-hour weeks, you will damage the reputation because your consumers will go, I don't like your practices, which ties into what Lexi was saying before, where you really need to, and not just from an ethical point of view, not overwork people, but from a business point of view, you need to maintain that that brand image that you were talking about, Nicole.
And there's even the level of, you need to make sure that even when it comes to like representation in games, or you're looking at the way that specifically there's been a lot of controversy around how females and women in the workplace are being treated, you need to make sure that those kinds of things are handled professionally within your workspace. Because people now are starting to care. Like, people are seeing that information and it's going to impact your sales and your games and your releases and how people receive that kind of stuff. So it's definitely something that everyone now needs to be thinking about, I guess.
It was interesting to see the evolution of that as well, Lexi. So a few years ago, even then, and Jack was mentioning it, when games was this kind of closed, it happened behind doors, kind of almost like writing, books, etc. Whereas movies and music, they've always kind of had this creation process out in the forefront. We watch people make music, we watch them make movies, we idolize and follow actors and directors, and we even know who our favorite directors usually are if you're a super movie fan. And this is kind of the direction that games seems to be headed, where we are a performance medium. And so the performance that we have as a community and as a development team, ultimately, it affects people looking at us. So you can look at some of those really controversial examples of directors and actors behaving poorly in movies. And this is perhaps the same direction that, well, definitely the same direction that we've kind of headed in games. And we're seeing this more recently with the Me Too movement, and some of the other larger companies having almost quite toxic work environments for women and people of color and different backgrounds and different cultures.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned toxicity, because toxic workplaces definitely, they're not good. And it'd be interesting to hear some perspective on what can be done to, I guess, mitigate that, what a company can do or a studio can do to avoid that. But let's also bring it back and think game communities. You know, the communities that players and consumers build around their favorite games and game companies. Those can get quite toxic as well. I'm sure we can all think of examples. You know, I'm going to cough League of Legends. Yeah, just, that wasn't even subtle. So I guess let's push this to Lexi as director of a studio. What do you think on this topic?
When it comes to social play, it is so difficult as a developer to be able to manage it in a way where you're like, this is going to be a completely safe environment. The community is going to be completely toxic, there's going to be you can't do it. It's impossible. So at this point, as developers, I feel like we have a responsibility to try and give people a foundation to work with, but in the end, people are going to say or do or act of their own volition. Obviously, that's what we want, right? It's more that there needs to be a structure in place to make sure that everyone feels like it's safe enough to engage in this environment, and also they have the mechanisms to defend themselves if necessary from toxicity or online abuse or whatever it is. But it's a very difficult thing. Like, no one's mastered it. Like, no one's mastered it. It's impossible. It's really difficult to think about like a black and white, this is how it's done. It just should be something that's always on developers' minds on how do we improve this.
Pushing off of that into the way that you design your products to create more or less, toxic behavior or aggressive behavior, or I think what really interesting example is team games that have tight regimented metas and requirements of team structure to win. And I'm going to bring it into League of Legends and Heroes of the Storm, because they're amazingly now universal sort of ideas, the MOBA. A lot of people know about the MOBA. So looking at a game like League of Legends, right, games did one thing very well in that, and that is getting people to want to go forward all the time. So unless you're consciously making an effort to consider all the team structures and positions with the random people that you've never met who don't have faces, you will continue to do that, even to the detriment of yourself or your team. And then, of course, that sort of behavior, the way that design pushes players into these rote things, means that they have to constantly be fighting it to think about the team strategy. Whereas in something like Heroes of the Storm, stuff like your shared levels and experience and so on mean that even if a player follows those instincts and just goes and does a thing, they still benefit their team in a way. They don't cause a detriment, so the team doesn't get angry at them. And leading into people getting angry at their teammates, which seems silly. You go, oh, why would you do that? And we all know it is, but we all do it. At some point, you go, oh, you're bloody off, that's it. These things that have these really strict rules and controls and virtual controls, because of course you can control the entire environment, are almost presented, especially when they become competitive. So think about a game that you've played when it didn't have a meta. Think about on-release Overwatch or 2009, 2010 League of Legends. The way that people enjoy and have fun in that, as opposed to its current format, which is regimented and controlled, are very similar to real-world sports. And the way that teams need to work together and interact in order to produce a specific goal. You have teams, you have plans, you have all that kind of stuff. And that's why we can do things like have analogies between sports and esports from a marketing and business perspective, where you can try to, create big tournaments and so on and so forth, is because you start to make one like the other. However, in the real world, you go and practice with people every week. You go and see them, you interact with them on a social level. You do that sort of human bonding thing that we're good at, to work together as a team to complete whatever your objective is, which you don't do if you click random queue and meet strangers online that to you don't have names or faces. They are usernames. You don't have that human connection, and you also don't have the pre-established networking and trying out and practicing together. So if you create an online sport or whatever competition to require the same level of teamwork and communication from people that don't play together in a casual setting, you will end up with toxicity, because that's based on the idea of a real world sport, which is what we've used to generate these competitive games. And that doesn't work because your players aren't doing the same thing as they are in the real world.
So the whole "it's easier to be mean if they don't have a face" sort of situation. I'm going to push this actually. Tom, as our student representative and representative of the audience, have you got any insights or experiences or even questions for our other panelists on this topic?
Nothing as of yet. Like, I definitely agree on the premise of you try to safeguard a community as much as you can, but it is inevitable that toxicity is going to come through. So the best thing that I've seen happen is just a lot of development studios having really good ways of removing the toxicity as it comes up.
So like moderation sort of thing.
Yeah. So for Rainbow Six is a game that I used to frequent, and there would be quite a lot of toxicity, especially during public matches where players didn't know each other. But there was a very, very fast turnaround between toxic reports being filed and action being taken place. And I feel like that's probably one of the better measures that I've seen during my online playing.
Okay. That's definitely very good. That's added some strategies to our current discussion. All right, so we've talked about toxicity. We've talked about lots of things. So let's push back off of this topic. It's all, we've talked about fixing up toxicity and everything. So I guess, is there anything in the direction and what's happening in games that are being made lately that's either made the situation made anything to do with toxicity worse or better? Like, feel free to name specific games. We're not sponsored by anyone. Oh, and I'll push this to the group at large, but let's go Nicole first.
I think it's really interesting because we have the online disinhibition, right? So where people will act differently online because for several reasons. One, I can say something and that's not really me, doesn't matter. Or say something, but I don't actually see the bomb land, right? I could say something horrible, but because in games, I'm not always looking at a person's actual face, I don't actually see that they're hurt. And I think, to be honest, from my experience and just some of the things that we see is often the strength of community policing, right? So a community is as good as the community wants it to be, right? So, but as developers, we all have to sit there and go, okay, so how do we streamline this process? And Lexi was talking about, and Jack was talking about it, where we make that social policing a lot easier, right? So we go, okay, how do we allow players to strongly police this? And we can do it in online games, right? I play quite a bit of Elder Scrolls Online, and there's a whole bunch of kicking people out of groups when they are toxic, right? And that's a little bit more less facilitated by the game. That's just one of those, we have social rules and expect people to follow it. But there's other elements as well where in, say, like League of Legends and Overwatch and games that perhaps don't have that option of, well, I'm just kicking that guy out or girl out for being toxic isn't going to necessarily be helpful because it's only a match or a handful of matches. But having that ability to actually go, hey, you know what, that's not okay. And the system, the game, having safeguards in there is helpful to create just a more positive environment in general. The community will usually clean itself up. I like to think good things about the direction that League of Legends has been heading. So from this extraordinarily toxic environment to a slightly less so, thanks to better community engagement.
Just to carry off what Nicole was talking about with Elder Scrolls Online, coming from just another MMO's perspective, I play quite a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and that game has like a very huge focus on like community and fostering its community and making sure that, people are just in general being kind to each other. And because of how like the end game of the game works, a lot of it is very like tight knit, and so a lot of people, like, you'll start running into the same people a lot, and so it's more or less like a community ran thing, as like, if people are just being like toxic or just being like just a bad person, like, it's going to just hurt their reputation on the server, so not a lot of people want to play with them. So it just makes people act nicer just in general, because they know that like the way that they can play the game is actually on the line if they're just a bad person. So I feel like that's just not even a way that the developers had to do it. It's just the community itself of just being filled with nicer people has just created their own way of managing the bad people, in a sense.
So would you say there's a specific, I guess, thing that's been set up to make the community self-regulate a bit more? Because, we self-regulate in everyday society because we can see each other's social cues by looking at, faces and actions, and the fact there's more people around. How does that translate over to online communities to make them self-regulate, particularly with games, and like you were talking about just now, Brandon?
Well, at least in like MMOs, like, you obviously have your player character. So, you have the version of like, yourself in a sense. So like, some people like to create a character that represents themselves or something that they would like to be or something like that. But as far as like how the game sort of pushes people to be nicer like that. They've just created a bunch of just community-based systems. So like, you have free companies, which is just, that game's equivalent of guilds. You have all these different like cross-world or cross-server text channels that everybody can, a bunch of people can join into and talk and just do game stuff together. And so because of all of that, like people can moderate those all of themselves. Like these cross-world text channels can be just moderated by the community or like the people who own it. So that also helps a lot in just keeping the bad people out of these much greater things. And I'm not 100% sure on this, but like I have heard that a lot of like the big owners of these cross-world chat channels like keep in contact with each other to like make sure that they know who the bad people are. So if a person is being like a consistent bad person, they just like never get invited into these things. So it's in some way it could like eventually be seen as possibly bad because people can eventually change, and people might not see that because they don't get the chance to ever really get in and talk to people now that they've changed. But for the most part, it does keep a lot of the toxic people out of these text channels. But then there's obviously the whole story of the owners of these text channels being the toxic people, but that's an entirely new discussion.
Yeah. So this is very similar to what you were talking about a minute ago, Nicole. And from looking at your papers, I imagine you've put at least a little bit of study into this sort of topic and how people feel social pressures while in these online groups. So is there anything special there?
I mean, honestly, a lot of my work relates back to a lot of the more solo games, but we do, when we look at the concept of activity theory and at the bottom part of the triangle, there is an entire range of factors that relate back to how social environments actually link to our behaviors within any given context, right? So we're usually reinforced by the rules of the community. And it's up to communities to define those rules. So we talk about ethical choices in games, right? So you can be Renegade or Paragon. And that's a game putting on a really strong, this action is good or bad, right? But in slightly more less obvious cases, we have people choosing what they would consider the best outcome or the nice outcome. I love The Witcher for this example because there's not necessarily always a ethical outcome there. And largely what we choose is what we would consider to be defined by our reality, right? Defined by society. I choose to, sorry guys, spoilers, save the children that are being captive in Crookback Bog because obviously won't someone think of the children? It's ethical. I'm going to save them, but ultimately that has run-on effects, right? But there's also the idea of division of labor within a community. So and how that ultimately, and that's great for shared games like League of Legends, etc. So people needing to ultimately commit and the division of labor towards going to that end point in the game and ultimately winning, and just generally society as a whole, what community you're in. So there are social elements to almost anything. So I went off with The Witcher before, single player game, but what we ultimately, the decisions we make in there can be heavily guided by the community in which we sit, right? Games are no longer just solitary activities. If I'm stuck in a game, I'll go look it up, right? And so look up the solution. And so that's a example of how we've moved forward from a single player game that would be just a me in a space to me in a space plus bringing everyone else from online.
So do you mind if I bring that back into both Nicole and Lexi? You're talking about creating systems. This is really interesting. Creating systems to help people deal with toxic players and negative behavior. But then because I'm a very cynical person and don't have a lot of faith in people, I then ask the question, who watches the watchman? And how do you ensure that a group of players, a group of nasty players, don't begin using your systems to just ostracize people or to, start just mass banning less toxic players? So what do you do when you've created that system? How do you stop it turning on itself?
Fabulous question.
Yeah.
I don't think I have an answer for that, actually. I think, yeah, from more of a research perspective, I've not seen that as much, but it would be really interesting to have a community of really toxic people, ultimately toxicity being the norm. So essentially, but yeah, really interesting. I have no answers. Lexi?
So this is why I say it's so difficult to build these systems, because there is no way to perfect this. Like, there's no way to execute this the way that everyone needs it to work. You can't moderate all of the content that's happening at this point in time. It's just too much. The internet is just too vast. You cannot moderate everything. And so the main thing that I think is what developers have a responsibility to tap into is this idea of reputation within a zero consequence environment. And when I say that, I mean games and online play has this kind of facade of like anonymity where you can do whatever, you can be whatever, there's no repercussions. And especially in VR and games, zero consequence environment, like in BioShock, you can choose to do whatever you want. You can save the little sister, you can just farm them, whatever you want to do. But in the end, does it have any impact on your day-to-day life? No, it's zero consequence. So those are the two main things that people kind of play on to think, oh, I'm going to use these systems to put other people under the bus or to report other people. If you do have this like self-moderated environment, the main thing that you can go off is reputation. So your online persona has a certain, reputation associated with it, but also from varying reputable sources. So whether it be mods of the game or online community or other communities, it's hard. It is a really difficult thing to execute. But I think the main thing that people can do to alleviate this kind of like the system being used against the players that it's trying to help would be to have this reputation-based system from multiple different areas. And whether or not you value moderators like ideas, or you value the community more, or it depends on who you value, whose opinion you value the most, is probably going to be able to help that a little bit.
That's really interesting. Actually, I do love the idea of the reputation almost. It's a little bit Black Mirror-ish though. I worry we'll head to a direction where, but yeah, so I think that's so interesting because, you can use those social rules to enforce a toxic community. But then, you would look bad because ultimately, yeah. But I think just that perception, and we talked about it ages ago when we were talking about, having reliability and credibility in a brand. I think if you are using, and your group, what have you, are using your, using the social rules and the rules in game to create a toxic environment, you're just damaging the brand that you're involved with, right? So people won't want to play that particular game because the nasty guys are just using the rules or the structures within the game to create a continuously toxic environment, and thus damaging the credibility of the product overall, taking away its desirability, if you will.
It's really interesting because these are just straight up real world problems. These are the same social sort of things that we encounter in day-to-day life with groups of humans when they get together. And I think to bring it back to how games will change society in the future, the more social they become, the more social rules of the real world that they introduce and the more interaction you have, the more problems you bring with it. So the more of this intertwining with how humans interact with each other in the real world will definitely be brought into games as we continue to put them everywhere.
Think about the future again as games get more interactive, and especially VR and AR. do you think these sorts of issues will be handled differently in VR and AR than they are right now? Such as, I don't know, less anonymity or more personal involvement in whatever you're doing? I'll push this to... Yes, it's sort of a prompt. I'll push this to Lexi because I saw you nodding.
So when it comes to VR and social play, there are so many ways that it can be utilized. But I think when it comes to VR, people, when they engage in virtual environments to that extent, they want avatars that represent themselves or their ideal persona, right? That inherently is going to give you some sort of like visual cues of, oh, you are this person, or oh, you identify as this, you come from this background, you like these things. And it's not necessarily a giveaway on who you are as a person, but you're more responsible for yourself, I feel, if you have a visual avatar that closely resembles or represents something that you respect or who you are, and it will inherently affect your play. And it's even been shown, like in VR environments, people feel more responsible for their actions just based off the fact that their movements are being portrayed in the virtual environment. They're taking on a physicality within the space. They feel more responsible for themselves. And so it takes away this like zero consequence. Oh, I'm responsible for my actions. My avatar represents myself to an extent. I definitely think it'll be slightly different in VR than it is what it is at the moment.
So we're discussing all this issue with toxicity and again, it is going to change in the future as the dynamics of gaming change, as we discussed at the start. So let's start thinking about the future again. So, and also virtual environments, because we've discussed that a bit. So games can go in a lot of directions, and like serious games or applied games, which I think is a term that makes mildly more sense, can be, well, I guess they're going to be going into the future. They're going to be using these technologies, and these games can actually go to some, I guess, if used badly, some quite creepy places. So do you think that these same factors are going to be immensely relevant and or an issue with more applied games using these sort of social technologies? I'll push this to Lexi again and then I'll put it to the room.
I mean, you can never know what the future of games is going to look like. It is so difficult to talk on or predict anything, especially VR is evolving so rapidly. But I think social VR is going to be a massive thing in the future, massive. And so inherently, I think it's going to be like completely way up there. Your representation, everything's going to be completely different. Your identity could potentially be completely virtual. I don't know. Future of games is such a difficult thing for me to try and predict because there are so many possibilities, and I feel like it's a completely untapped area. But I'd be curious to see what other people have to say.
Well, Nicole, from a more academic research perspective.
I can't agree with Lexi more. No, honestly, so yeah, the future of games, and I actually love the point that you touched on there, Lexi, about our sense of identity, right? And getting caught up, and like there's lots of discussions about whether or not one day I'll be sitting at my desk and be wearing a VR headset and I'll be at my desk kind of thing. So at a desk, just constant inception because I'm at a desk wearing my headset, which would have me at work in my desk and working. And it would just so strongly align ultimately to my sense of identity, which is, I think, when we link back to the whole conversation about toxicity in VR, that's a wonderful point from Lexi's, is that we see ourselves a little bit more strongly aligned with somebody or something that looks like us and is us and represents us and has our reputation, values. So yeah, no, it's an interesting direction to be talking about ultimately. I think VR and AR definitely have great great futures ahead of them for not just entertainment, but a serious perspective as well.
I'll pass this to Jack, and then I'll push it to Brandon and Tom for input, because this is quite a cool topic. Jack, bringing it back to the use of these games by companies and the things that a company or a studio could do by applying these same principles. What sort of dangers and issues can you see there, or just positives? Let's not be biased and nihilistic here. Let's just
we're talking about social aspects in applied games.
Yeah, but also we've already talked about how, like in The Witcher, you can simulate social aspects in games. And we're talking about how things are moving to VR and AR. How could those sort of simulations, or even just the environments, affect people, especially with your experience making training simulations and gambling games?
It really depends what the purpose of the piece of software is. So if I've given somebody a physical environment and a set of constraints, and I've gone, I want you to enjoy this, these are the basic rules and outlines, then they'll act in whatever way, depending on how responsible they feel is to them fun or enjoyable. However, if I present them with a piece of software with a more defined purpose, more likely they're going to follow that purpose, depending on the seriousness of the situation and the kind of software you're using. So then that leads back to it almost becoming part of the thing there is, what do I design for them? If you design a piece of software for a VR, helping people follow procedures to get off a sinking boat, very rarely are you going to have the same social problems that you do in the entertainment and gaming setting. You might touch on different problems that people have in emergency situations and that kind of stuff, and selfishness and yada, 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 or gamified in the who wins, who gets off first. But it's a different set of circumstances that you're going to get from different areas. And the more serious games we get that touch on, real world analogy issues, instead of I am jumping through a tomb of ancient relics or what have you, the more you can look at real world examples of these scenarios and how humans react. So the closer you make it to the real, the closer, I would argue, you can expect the social aspect to be to the real world analogy. But that's an entirely different kettle of fish to, should I make it just because I can make it? So you mentioned it briefly. The stuff like training for emergency disasters is always useful, but we humans don't just spend money on things for good and peace and love. Unfortunately, a lot of us also spend a lot of money on things to hurt other humans. So there are people that go and design military training software with a piece of in mind specifically to get somebody used to the idea of ending another person's life using a piece of technology like a helicopter, or a gun on the side of a helicopter. It's a specific example that I've seen up close. And that's a question where you lead into the should I, not what will they react with it, but should I make it in the first place? And that's where you get into it, an interesting area with applying interactive media, because somebody is no longer observing something, they're participating in it. And that's what we're all talking about, the ways that people are behaving with each other, because they're not just watching, they're participating, they're acting, and they're being acted upon.
Sounds like a interesting and strong path for the future that can go very dark.
Yes, based on our history, I imagine the technology will, on a serious note, VR will be extensively used for training of less than pleasant ideas. I can't pretend that won't exist, because based on our history and what we use technology for, that's what people will do. But yeah, let's move away from.
Yeah. And now for a ray of sunshine, let's get the student perspective again from Tom.
Well, I think there was a lot of good points in there, like the interaction between like the system as a whole is heavily based upon context, with social norms and like different etiquette being altered depending on where this technology is used.
Brandon?
Just to piggyback off a little bit of what Jack was saying and go into a bit more of the positive side of using VR as like an applied training thing for games. Another idea that we were trying to come up with when we were working on our capstone project with QFest was creating more of a like instructional sort of fire safety / fire escape type simulator, where it would like still be used like in a open day community engagement type thing, but it would also be used to like teach maybe younger children or people who just didn't know about how to be safe with like how to escape like a burning building, for example, or like the nuances of that, like opening a door that has a fire behind it, or opening a window in a burning room, stuff like that. And we were going to try and come up with ideas that would sort of gamify the whole aspect of being safe around fire and escaping a burning building through just interesting and or fun game mechanics. So like one of the original ideas for our game was like, you know, you were this guy called the Rescuer, and it was going to be some sort of like multiplayer type game where there would be one person who would be on a laptop controlling like the fire and the destruction of the building, and there'd be one person in the VR trying to go through this burning building and save everybody, while also learning about all these like fire safety tips and techniques, like, you know, getting low and, you know, not opening up doors that have fire behind them so they don't have fire explode in their face and all that. So that was one of the ways that we were going to use VR to like create, you know, training for, or, you know, community engagement, but also, sorry, words are really struggling to find the proper words. Make fire safety more enjoyable and easier to learn for the younger audiences. That's what we were trying to do with that idea. In the end, that didn't end up coming to what we were able to do because of technology limitations, as well as just time limitations because of capstone. But that is just one idea that we could have done with VR, as well as, you know, creating a social aspect was, while also combining in applied and learning aspects as well.
That's a very good, slightly more positive application.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess from here, we have covered a lot of this content that we have planned. So I guess, are there any other topics that you believe that you, as our panelists, believe we should really discuss? If not, we'll move on to discussing more student-related things. So the future of the students watching on YouTube later.
We can probably just go on to the discussing for the future of the students. Otherwise, we'll continue to ramble probably.
I mean, I won't lie. I want to hear more about the big wholesome energy mage game, but it's,
I second that.
Wholesome energy mage game. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of, we were talking about all the different areas that games go and all the different industrialized and commercialized areas, which is a bit of a downer because you're like, oh, it's just going to be made money out of. But then you see people creating stuff with the specific intent of helping people dealing with specific things. So when you have that responsibility, how do you make sure you're doing the right thing? What steps do you take to, you know, ensure that you're creating a product that is going to do the good, you know, is going to be a wholesome thing?
I think games have been helping people for so long inadvertently. Like, it wasn't even people's main, like, developers didn't go out and make a game and be like, I want to make something that helps people socially interact at a very young age over the internet. You know, like they didn't go out, or I know a lot of games that have helped people through with anxiety or with depression or whatever it is inadvertently. So I think it was super interesting to be able to pick up a project and tap into that a little bit more, see what you could do if you did from the very beginning be like, I specifically, through this game, want to help people with wholesome energy, mental illness, or dealing with, you know, pulling those social muscles, like learning to interact with people, or being able to remove yourself from stressful environments, or even self-care, like helping people practice their self-care, even if it's just playing games, is their version of self-care. I think like games have been doing that for such a long time already. But yeah.
That's a very nice. So here's something else to talk about that's perhaps more related to the students. I guess we were talking about toxic work environments before. Have you got any specific, well, let's not call anyone out, so to speak, but can you think about, well, I guess things for people to look for when moving into a game studio, or, you know, just so they've got that little bit of extra preparedness or I don't know, you can't be that choosy straight out of uni, but any examples there? You've been nodding a lot again, Lexi, so I'll push it to you.
It's a tough one because I know that the games industry is relatively brutal. I know it's difficult. It's a very hard industry to like commit to financially, with your time, with everything, especially since it's relatively unknown in so many aspects. But the one thing that I wish I had known straight out of uni when it came to looking for work straight out of university is understand your worth, first of all, and understand that your time commitment should not exceed contractually what you have agreed to. Do not do unpaid overtime. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you are not doing ridiculous sprints. Yes, it's a job, and I understand for so many people it's such a passion and people want to do it for as much time as they get in a day, but you need to make sure that you take care of yourself. That was something I really struggled with straight out of university because I just wanted to do everything. I wanted to get in games and I wanted to start work early and continue to early hours of the night, but you need to make sure you take care of yourself. That's really important.
Yeah, that's definitely very, very important. So I guess we can back off from the student thing a little and think game development's becoming very accessible. You know, I was hearing earlier that that Unreal Engine has recently made their cut of the profits a bit less by waiting till you make your first million or something before charging. So things are being made more accessible. How do you think that's going to, I guess, change things into the future, or how do you think it's been changing to make things more accessible? And I'll push this to Jack.
A very controversial opinion here. I'm not sure how much it will change. Because while there are a lot of people who begin, there are also a lot of people who go, this is harder than playing Skyrim. I don't wish to continue. And I think you will see an increase, but I don't expect it to be this massive explosion, because for the amount of people that begin delving into that world to the amount of people that go, here's my finished product, the difference is still massive. And I don't think that's ever going to change, even if the tools and the software get better, because what it requires is a lot of work, pulling together a lot of things from a lot of different places, a lot of communication and a bunch of these other things that the software won't fix or help. It can make the process easier, but ultimately the choice to do that, the effort and the dedication come from the individual. And I think, yeah, you will get a gradual increase as more people become aware of it and more people find that entrance point easier. But as opposed to the amount of, studios and outputted works, I can't see a big explosion. Obviously, there will be increases as more and more people become aware, but I don't expect whiz-bang Unreal 5 to go, look at all these amazing products, because it takes a lot more than just the software.
Yeah. So let's go back to the good stuff for students. There was some mention during our discussions prior to this about the different roles that there are in game development. So we've talked about it being more accessible, but it has been brought up that there are more roles than a lot of students would understand for sets of skills that they might gain outside of just being designer, programmer, 3D modeler. Does anyone want to shed some light on that, I'm going to pop it to Lexi, and then we can all filter through and have a say.
I think it's mainly shown by the fact that all of us come from different backgrounds. Gamification applies to so many different things. Even when it comes to myself as an artist, being able to create a virtual environment has so many applications to so many different industries, especially since virtual reality has so many applications to so many different industries. So it's not a matter of being able to like list everything that could potentially come out of having these skill sets. It's more like, if you can think about where you think the hardware is going to go, you can apply it to like almost anything, depending on what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other perspectives on this? Brandon, as a recent graduate, or things that you especially want to cover or think about in this?
Having not had the opportunity to actually get into the industry just yet, I guess I could just push forward, like, I don't know, some general tips on just making sure that you're constantly expanding your skill set to make sure you don't just tunnel vision on one thing like I did, which didn't work out very well at all. I guess like just the biggest thing I would say is just because I don't have enough industry knowledge because I haven't got in there yet. But from a lot of tips that I have heard both online and just from talking with people in general is to just, you know, at least make sure that your skill set is a bit open. Focus on one thing, obviously. Like, make sure you're good at what you want to do. Like, if you're a game designer, obviously, you know, make lots of GDDs, make lots of prototypes and all that stuff. But, you know, don't be afraid to, like, you know, delve into a bit of, you know, programming, learning how to do, like, program this particular thing so you can make your prototypes even better, or learn a bit of modeling so that you can add in some of your own made models into your own prototype to, again, make your prototype better. That would just be something that I would say just as like a general thing. But yeah, as far as like all the other special roles in the actual industry itself, I can't add too much onto that myself.
Jack, you've been doing some UX stuff. Well, you've been doing a lot of UX stuff, user experience and that sort of thing.
A lot of it's fluid, shifting, changing all the time. And classifications for something is different and it's split into two things, or those things are now combined into something else. Go and find stuff that you enjoy. Figure out what people are calling that job related to it, you know, now, and go and work on it. And the other stuff that you need in order to make the thing that you enjoy happen, delve into that as well. So for example, I really enjoy creating really usable interfaces for really good concepts that might not always have great interfaces or great design environments. But yeah, and that includes a lot of things around that. UI stuff, front-end development, front-end programming, small animation stuff, a little bit of, you know, essentially it never hurts to dabble into a little bit of everything. But as much as we can list off a list of positions that I've seen advertised for, the names will change. Go and find the stuff that you enjoy doing, and then get good at it, and then see what sounds related to that in the job listings on Seek or so on.
Yeah, it's very good advice. Anything from you, Nicole, as someone who has taught a lot of fresh people to the industry?
Addition to that, like, I graduated the games degree myself, like, very, very long time ago. And I think as a student a very, very long time ago, I committed the sin of being too specialized, had one focus and wasn't flexible or diverse enough straight out of graduation. And I think that's the thing that I do love to drive home is, yes, have an interest. As Jack said, make sure that you focus on your interest and look into your interest, but be flexible as well. At the time, I really wish I had gone and done more programming. I still do. My Python is pathetic, or anything similar. But at the same time, this is a great opportunity to consider, all right, be flexible. And some of the students will get to the end of the degree and the capstone, especially our designers, our pure designers, and they will be asked to, hey, now, what's your design doing? Oh, well, they're off in production and I'm here twiddling my thumbs. No, be flexible, learn a new skill, okay? So, and just spend time outside of what you're being taught in classes to learn. Okay, so a lot of university is self-driven. See, there's lots of nodding coming from the panel. A lot of university is self-driven learning, right? So we give you some really, really base tools. The best people I saw from my degree, and I've seen it over the years, aren't the ones who sit there, just do the 12 hours of work they require per unit per semester. They do additional, okay? So they go out there, they've made the animation that the lecturer or the tutor or whoever gave them, and then they've gone and added something else to it, right? Might code some sick, amazing stuff into it. So be flexible and do extra work. Go beyond what you're learning at the moment. We're giving you the foundation. Now you add the bricks on top of that. So yeah, that's my feedback or my suggestions.
All right, that's a good wealth of suggestions. So we've talked about a lot of things actually. So let's think. Well, actually, I've got a question from the audience. Any tips on increasing the likelihood of actually getting into the industry coming out of school? And I know that you, Jack, actually had a tip for us last week.
Yeah, before I go into that, I thought, Lexi, did you have something to add as well?
I mean, I was just going to say, do game jams. Do as many game jams as you can do. It's such a wealth of knowledge in those.
And for a bit of self-promotion, we do game jams at least once or twice per year in the Game Dev Club.
They're good.
And
you should do.
So to answer your question now, Cameron, leading on from what, if there's any students in the chat or watching this video later, I'll get my serious face on. If you're just looking at this and going, Nicole's just saying that because they're a teacher, that's why they would say that. No, it's true. What Lexi said is also really important. If you're taking the time to go and study this stuff, pay money for it, and go, this is what I'm doing with this portion of my life, go all the way. Don't sit on something. And thank you to everybody who has shown up to stuff like this, because this is important. When somebody says to you, and it will probably bring back around to networking before we end as well, when somebody says to you, oh, there's a meetup on or there's a game jam on, don't sit on it, don't sleep on it, go to it. Even if you worry that you don't have the experience or the skills, that's how you learn. There is no rote memory for this because it is in the end a creative industry. There is no formula that you will learn that will make amazing stuff. It is a culmination of your skill and your, feel free to bleep this out, you're giving a shit. That is what will make you successful. That is what will get you a job in the industry. When you don't just show a resume, you show here's all the, I won't repeat myself so it doesn't have to bleep too much. Here's all the stuff that I've done. Here, these are the things that I participate in. These are the skills that I've learned. These are the different ways that I can contribute. Particularly if you're a designer, that show that you're not just, I'm the ideas guy. So yeah, the best way to get an industry job while you're a student is to go ham. Go into everything you can. Go to events run by game dev clubs. Go and utilize the resources around you. There are students there that are going to be doing sound design and film and animation and graphics design. Go and collaborate with them. Go and learn how to do that. Learn how to pitch your ideas to people before you have to do it professionally. Because there's a much less consequence if you pitch an idea to someone in your university and your early trimesters and they go, no, and you go, okay, cool. But later on when you're in a more professional position, there might be a lot more relying on it. So you want that practice. Go and take advantage of these human resources around you. Work with them. Learn stuff off them. Learn their jargon, learn their lingo. Because when you're in an industry position, you won't just be talking to people that are just doing your course. You'll be talking to a lot of different people who know a lot of different things. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but I just hammer this one home, kids.
And as the undergrad student on the panel that isn't me, have you got any questions on that topic, Tom?
No, but I was about to chime in that that's some really really vital advice that really like hit me in the face hard during my first game jam. As a design major, you know, we were sailing along, and then for the rest of the day, I was there twiddling my thumbs, and then through that, I learned quite a lot myself. So, and I've also, you know, been witnessing a lot of game jams, probably join up on the next game dev game jam. But no, I just think that it's been, yeah, really, really sound, solid advice coming from it all.
Going to game jams is great because it means you actually make games. Because I don't know, this is really stupid to say, but just make games. Make little pieces of trash. Do it. Go for it. Try something weird and wacky. Because you won't produce gold the first time you touch a keyboard or the first time you click release on itch.io or what have you. You'll do it through practice and learning what you can and can't do and what you love and just getting different experiences.
It's like what we said in your introduction, 2-day trash games.
Yeah.
You're
just as practitioners, we're just as much products as what we produce, right? So effort has to go into polishing who you are, what you represent, what you're capable of doing, right? So, and I think that's a really key thing to think about moving forward is, you know, you are as a professional, your portfolio really. So add to it. Game jams. In the games degree, you have the opportunity to make so many games. I sit in the Studio 1 and 2 at the moment, right? So at least in Studio 1, we made 2 games. At the end of the semester for Studio 2, we'll make 1 game, and then you've got your capstone game, your fundamentals of game design game, all of those games. Make sure what you're producing is the best you. It'll go into your portfolio, and of course, your 2-day trash games. Super important.
I mean, we've already pretty much mentioned how to
I think
network.
Lexi had something to add on to the end of that as well.
Yeah, look, don't wait for me to call on you if you've got something to add.
Every time I open my mouth, you start talking. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I was gonna go off what Jack was talking about. It's hard. This is hard. This is really, really difficult. And yes, you're getting this education that fundamentally is going to help you, but you have to be better than literally everyone else almost. Like you have to cover your bases. You need to know what you're doing. You need to get yourself out there. You need to talk to other developers, because in the end, people around you are going to be as supportive as some of your classes are going to be. And like, as a game developer, you work in a team a lot of the time. Make sure that you go out, you meet all the other devs, you talk to them, you learn about their skill sets, you round yourself, because this is hard. It's really, really difficult.
I wasn't going to add anything to it, Cameron.
I was giving a decent pause because, well, we've sort of networking being just show up device there, which was one of the topics. So I guess let's head to our final question, and then we'll go into chatting. What do you wish you knew when you were first entering the industry? Would have known that you didn't. Was that my internet connection being dodgy? Or?
I'm getting a fair amount of lag for you. I don't know if anybody else is.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but yeah, he was cutting out. I thought it might have been on my end.
Yeah, no, we'll
I'll try again. I
think
this is
we
a bit
did-
odd.
I know I got the question off you. Did anybody else?
Yeah, I got the end question, yeah.
Yeah. Has everyone got the question? Yeah.
Do you mind if I start with practice your dramatic skills? Practice socializing. I know, for example, a completely different industry, completely different stuff, physical, real world farm stuff, going to sit in a computer all day. And I thought, oh, that's what I'll be doing. I'll just be sitting at a computer all day. But there is a lot of talking, and there is a lot of, as Nicole said before, being a product. So if you did drama in high school, go into a refresher on those sort of things. For presenting, being animated, practicing being able to speak in front of large groups of people, that kind of stuff. That is something that it's worth keeping an eye on and an ear on. And if you know that that's not something you're particularly great at, take the opportunity in university to practice it with a bunch of people who are fairly understanding and also going through the same stuff probably. Not to say the industry isn't understanding, it's, you know, but make sure you get your practice out. Sorry, Nicole, you're going.
So what's that, Jack?
I can say, oh, sorry. It's just, I can say through like the year and a half that I've been at university, my confidence and showmanship has definitely shined through a lot more. So yeah, very, very, very perfect environment, for lack of a better word, to flare out.
So Jack, were you saying that they should actually do their oral presentations at university?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's what a job interview is.
Yes, I can't iterate that more, right? So I see a lot of people get really nervous and afraid and don't want to do their oral presentations at uni. I get it. I'm not that great at them either. I get nervous, etc., says the lecturer in the room, right? But it's about practice. And as Jack was saying, the most supportive environment you can have will be at uni. Yes, there are grades, but all the people who are watching you are also terrified out of their mind and learning how to present as well. Okay, so it's the time where you learn how to engage in that showmanship, and showmanship is important. Being an engaging person to talk to is important.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes to break that wall of, to break this fourth wall, 5 minutes before this presentation started, I was very nervous and shaking. I know for me, I go and I get a glass of water, or I get something that I can use with my hands every now and then, you know, ruler to fiddle with or something. And that's a technique that works for me. So if you find yourself in these scenarios, go and talk to people, talk to your lecturers as well, and go, how, you know, what should I do, you know, in these scenarios? Because there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of experiences in this. You are not alone in feeling nervous or worried or scared, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a very human thing. And you're in the best place to practice finding your way to breach that. Welcome to my TED Talk.
Have you got something, Lexi?
When it comes to like networking and talking to people, the only piece of advice that I can really give anyone is just go to everything. Like, even if you think it has the tiniest like application to you and your skill set, go to Unreal Engine meetups, go to Unity meetups, go do a bunch of game jams, because you're going to meet someone there who's going to know someone who's going to bring you to another event who's going to know someone who could potentially get you work. Like, a lot of the work that I've obtained has been from the most convoluted process, and it's just been me going to an event who's known someone who knows a guy who went to another event that could get me some work. So just, yeah, go to everything. Meet as many people in the space as you can.
I guess just to piggyback off of that, of just going to things and doing things. I used to be like incredibly bad at, you know, public speaking and I guess, you know, pitching forward my ideas. And while at the end of Capstone, I was still like not the best at presenting. Nicole will probably talk me up at least a little bit more. But
You were great.
But a lot of the issue that I had with getting better at like presenting and all that was that I just kept on getting lost in my own thoughts of just only thinking about the bad or the worst situations. And since then, like, because, oh, sorry, I just want to backtrack before since then. Because of like being constantly locked in my own thoughts of, you know, just the worst possible situations happening, it made me keep on stuttering or forgetting parts of the presentation, then as such not being as engaging to the audience. Since then, I've tried to like, I guess just be not as, what's the word I'm trying to look for here? Try not to think as much, basically. Just let it happen and just talk about the stuff that you're passionate about. Then I know when it comes to like, presentations in uni, it can be a little bit difficult when there's, you have to follow certain structures to reach the curriculum and all that. But if you're just casually pitching off your idea to somebody, like you don't even really have to write it up. If you know what you're making, you can just come up with it on the spot. And it'll sound much more engaging because just you know what you're talking about. So you don't have to like look for anything. You don't have to sound like you're reading off a script, so on and so forth. So not that I can say that I'm perfect at that yet. I'm still trying to get better at it, but that's just something that I've learned since I've graduated. And I just wish that I learned it before I graduated so that my presentations were better.
Yeah, I certainly remember something I remember whenever I'm doing a speech, hence why I always ad-lib the entire thing, is all of my high school teachers were saying things like, don't use palm cards if you don't have to. If you go in, just know the topic and then don't read anything while you're in there, you'll automatically be more engaging.
And this is all stuff that goes to the outside world as well. These soft skills, everything you learn, all this team engagement, that's one of the reasons to go to a university, is to get practice in that in, because you can apply that anywhere, to any position, any field of work or study that you want to involve yourself in.
Yeah, and I just piggybacking off that, almost anyone can learn programming. There's some really wonderful resources on the internet, and design and animation, and there would be no subject specific skill that I can tell you or list off that can't be learned elsewhere, right? It's the environment in which we strive to facilitate for you, right? So those soft skills, those working in teams, like goodness, if moving into the degree, I was terrible at working in teams. Other students terrified me, right? But that's what you learn, is learning about teamwork, learning the soft skills, project management, time management, communication. Soft skills are the things that you learn by engaging in an environment. The subject specific stuff like programming, that's a bonus. It's great. But for me, it's very much about communication. And from a perspective of when I watch you guys present, I'm determined to like what you're saying. Just work on how it's communicated. I think is often the thing is practice.
To put Nicole and all the other lecturers in the shit, lean on your lecturers. Go and ask them things. Talk to them about stuff. Creating more work for them, I know, but it's not high school.
Yeah,
you can ask as many. Yeah, exactly. Go and iterate your things. Make them better. You don't have to worry about, I hand it in once and it's done, because all of these skills build off each other.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I like when I see someone come after an assignment go, I didn't quite hit the nail on the head with this one. What would have you done to make this better? And, we're in between semester 1 and semester 2 at the moment, and I'm getting a few of those questions. And it's like, cool, I like you. You'll go far because you're constantly getting better and wanting to strive for better.
As Lexi said before, I paraphrase, shit is hard. That's all you can do, is improve yourself as much as you can.
So difficult. But it's the best job in the world, right? Like, it's definitely worth it.
Okay.
Sorry. I was going to say, sorry, Cameron, we've derailed you. Your questions.
We're pretty much at the end of planned content. There's a couple of topics that we've moved past so quickly that they're not really relevant anymore that I had. So we've more or less reached the end. So if there's any topics that you guys skipped that you think that you really want to talk about, or if there's any questions from our audience, which is not as large as I was expecting, but any questions from the audience, then we can ask them now. Goodbye.
but everybody attending has a slight leg up over everybody else in their class.
Very much so.
Everybody else will have to watch it on YouTube and not be able to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing I can think of to finish out my TED talk is make sure you, if you're a designer, go and bat your designs around with your classmates, because it's easy to get into what we call the whirlpool of my own bullshit, where you might work on something by yourself for months and think it's amazing, but then somebody else goes, this is boring, and you get defeated. Work with other people on your stuff and bounce ideas off one another while you're all in the same space and students together.
Just to piggyback off of that, because I'm quite literally working on a solo project at the moment. Yeah, I just can't stress enough just how important it is to at least just like have a fresh set of eyes to look at what you're making if you're working on something alone. Because just as an example, when I was making just like the early stages of this project I'm working on, I was like, oh yeah, this is perfectly fine. This should be easy enough. They should understand this. And then as soon as I sent it out for testing within the first 5 minutes, I was already getting messages of just like, I don't understand this. Why did you make this? This is way too difficult. And it's like, yeah, yeah, I guess so.
Nicole, I'd really like to hear your opinions on this after your field of study, but it's really interesting to see how different a product is. There's 3 different entities. You have an entity that you've made, an entity that someone plays, and that this weird ground mix in between that's spread about by media and reviewers and so on. Like, it's so interesting to see how something that you go, oh, this is simple, somebody else goes.
Well, you really do need to consider that we're not just creating experiences that elicit a response from the player. So we're not just creating games that are fun. Players are actually bringing in their perception of fun and their understanding and their psychological schema for how something should work into a game. And it's why we wind up with games that are really, really similar, because, you know, I go into this game and I have an expectation that this is how it's going to work. So I really like the Bethesda games. Skyrim, I've spent far too much time on in my lifetime. And part of the formula there and why you've got a lot of similarities between likely Fallout and all the other elements is because we have that expectation when we're walking into that space, right? So players bring as much to the game as they take away from it. And I think that's something that you really need to consider. When you're working on a project, especially at a student level, go join the game dev club, because it's going to need, you're going to need that outside advice. Consider user experience, consider usability, all of these elements as well. What makes sense to us as individuals doesn't always make sense to the player. So as developers, you are rarely developing for yourself. And if you are, it's not going to be very good, right? You're developing for someone else, designing for the other, if you will. So really considering who you're designing for, what those people are going to be bringing to your game and what they'll be getting out of your game is incredibly important. Playtesting. Don't fake playtesting, do playtesting. Make sure you playtest often and frequently and as much as possible. Yeah, that's my input, Jack.
That's good. Talking about bringing experiences, players bringing expectations, and leaning way back, visual communication. If you're an early student in your uni course here watching this video now, or I say now for me, later for you, go and do me a favor. Go and play the Stanley Parable, released in 2013. Figure out how it predicted what you were thinking when you played it in 2020.
I like it.
When you do some of those things and it goes, oh, you were thinking this and you were trying to achieve that through these methods. 7 years ago, somebody used the language and all the design stuff we're talking about and your preconceptions to predict your actions 7 years later. Go and play that and think about that.
Sounds ominous.
So I have a question from the audience to close us out, I think. It's bringing us right back when we were discussing ethics in game design. Way back at the start of this. It's basically asking what can be done instead of microtransactions to make money, and casting aspersions as to the how ethical such microtransactions are. So I'll send this to Jack first.
I feel like I just talk way too much. It all depends on what you want. That, from a design point of view, it's all dependent on what you want. If you want to put play behind paywalls, there are other ways to do that through content packs and so on and so forth, like big DLCs and that kind of stuff for your single player experience. If you want to drive people away, put microtransaction in post-launch and put paywalls for playing and mechanical dynamic stuff. It all depends on what you want. The reason some of these things are seen as unethical, because everything that we go, oh, this is terrible, can be used, and you can find examples of it being used in good ways, in positive ways, in ethical ways. The reason it becomes unethical is because the choice behind what somebody wants when they implement it is unethical. They don't go, I want to trade this money for this experience. They go, I want to suck someone dry like a sponge. So really, that's where it comes down to. There are a lot. Pick your thing, find your solution. Whether you have an advertisement, a 30-second thing for an unlocked piece of content or your further run, or whether you go into a loot box style thing, which, for example, for a lot of people with trading cards worked for quite a while. It's only when you can't trade them that I think people start to have an issue with it after you purchase it. So again, it really depends on what you want. The best thing you can do if you go, what do I want instead of X or Y, is to go, what's out there, what's available, what fits my project, and how can I use it ethically? There's no just one good or one bad method for continued money for service.
Lexi, have you got thoughts?
I mean, I don't personally have too much experience when it comes to developing with microtransactions in mind or anything like that, especially since a lot of the stuff that I do is more focused on research or seeing if this thing actually has a positive impact on a person's health rather than how much money can I make from this project. It's microtransactions are hard because I know that it's difficult to make money from games a lot of the time. It's just more of a sense of think about the company that may be implementing your microtransactions and what releases they've had in the past, what resources they have access to, what development timelines they have, and then kind of form your own opinion on it because it's different for everyone, definitely.
All right. Are there any more inputs on this question?
I guess it's just worth noting that, again, in the idea of games as a service or even a product, somebody is producing games, right? Jack and Lexi and Brandon are all sinking their time and livelihood into producing games. It makes sense that at some point it's going to need to be monetized. I'm sure they enjoy eating and paying rent, and so you do sometimes see I don't want to pay $60 for a release, right? Okay, then it has to be monetized in another way. Oh, but I don't like loot boxes. Okay. Oh, also don't like ads. At some point, it has to have some kind of monetary value attached to it. And to necessarily go, hey, loot boxes are unethical, I think is far too limiting. I think you definitely need to consider what Jack was talking about in the idea that loot boxes aren't necessarily unethical, it's how they're used, or seeing some of those games where looking at some of those more dialogue based games, and half the good conversation points are locked behind paywall where you have to pay 5 diamonds that you never earn throughout the game process. Instead you have to purchase, and having that, trying to make sure that the experience is equitable for everybody involved. So not putting somebody at a disadvantage if they're not paying for the game. Those are just compared to someone who is. But those are things to consider. But I don't necessarily think that loot boxes and microtransactions are unethical from the get-go. It's just a different type of monetization, I guess.
It's a tool. It's a tool to produce money out of your effort.
Yep, definitely. So if you say, well, I had a lot of it with people, I don't want to pay $100 for a PlayStation new release, then what will you pay for it? And how will the people who went and spent quite a considerable amount of time in the development be able to pay rent or eat or fund the next development?
Well, at this point, we're very close to 2 o'clock. So I think we're about out of time on our time slot. I'm very impressed with how we filled it up. If we've got any closing remarks from people, all I can say is, well, my closing remarks are thanks for joining us. If you did enjoy it, give us feedback, because this is our first panel event and we want to do more, or tell future execs to do more. Hand it down to them, as it were. So
also, if you didn't enjoy, feedback is appreciated. What we did wrong.
Yeah,
I like that. That's a really good point, Tom.
This is an experimental process for us. So any feedback is good feedback, like Tom said. So do we have any closing statements from any of our, glorious experts?
Is this the part where we plug like social media links or emails or people
Promote
to
yourselves. That's
email us if they have extra questions that they didn't want to ask in the audience or whatever, or if they're watching on YouTube?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, do it.
Well, I'll let somebody else do it first because I don't want to go first. No, I'm kidding. I'll start the train. Let's just, if somebody just, my email, how do we want to do that? Because can I just put it in chat, or do you want me to give it to you and you just put it in the description of the YouTube thing or whatever, or what do you want to do?
Either or, you can even type it up on your screen and share screen.
Can I?
Yeah.
How do I do that?
You've got a button down the very bottom that's highlighted in green called share screen.
Let's hope this doesn't actually share my full screen.
You can choose
cool.
a window.
I can just... whiteboard. Cool. I can just do that.
That too.
Wait, can I? Oh, share. Oh, there we go. Is that working?
Yeah, we can all see the whiteboard.
Email. There you go. If anybody ever wants to chuck an email my way, I don't get any other emails except from twitch.tv for people I follow. So it'd be nice to split up the emails. So
all right.
If anybody should have any questions for me, that would be interesting. But yeah, I'm gonna try and stop this share now. How do I do that? Oh, there it is.
I'll go next, I guess. If you want to view trash, go and do ajjmcc.itch.io or ajjm.itch.io. That's my trash. If you want to... If you're sitting there studying and going through your course and going, I want to learn a little bit more about X or Y, or just get general advice, feel free to shoot some emails to that. It's always happy to sit and chat with people and offer the shitty TED Talks that I do. Yeah.
I kind of figured that the Game Dev Club can help distribute where I'm at QUT, guys. You'll usually see me hanging around S Block. I'm there.
I'm just Lexi Townsend art on everything. So send me a message on Twitter or send me an email, lexitownsendart@gmail.com.
That's
If you
right,
have any
Twitter's a
questions.
thing.
Twitter, yay!
Oh.
And if you're interested in following the project that I'm working on, it's Runaway Mage on everything, Twitter and Instagram.
As the secretary of the GDC, I'm happy to take everyone's information and put it up on like the Facebook, Discord, and everything. Just help get everyone's word out.
Cool.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, that would work.
Okay then. Well, I guess I guess we can close this panel here because it's already gone overtime. I wasn't sure we'd fill it up.
Goodbye, everyone.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
So
Thanks, guys.
thanks and clap emoji for our wonderful panelists.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
I do have one more closing statement.
Oh, what
Damn it. I was going to say make sure to like and subscribe.
Mash that like button. There we go. Done.
So close.
Easy.
All right, I'll cut it there. Bye. Thanks for tuning in.